Welcome to the Gut 360 podcast. I'm your host, Eli Brecher, a registered associate nutritionist on a mission to empower you to transform the health of your mind, body, and gut. This podcast is the place where we share nutrition tips, mindset tools, and actionable steps to help you thrive on your journey to a healthier gut and a happier you. If you're ready to get into the driver's seat of your own health and unlock your full potential, you're in the right place, and I am so glad you're here. Hello and welcome back to your favorite gut health podcast. Happy Monday if you're listening in real time when this comes out. I hope you're having a wonderful start to your week. Today on the Gut 360 podcast, we're talking all about nutrition and mental well-being as a working mum with an amazing guest, Jenna Hope, who I'm just about to introduce. So head out for your morning walk or grab yourself a matcha latte, which I know both Jenna and I are obsessed with. Before we get started, as you guys know, we have an opening tradition on the podcast, which is the food of the week and my favorite way to use it. So my food of the week this week is beetroot, which is in season this month, and beetroots are packed with antioxidants, vitamin C, folate, and fiber, and they also contain nitrates, which have been shown to help reduce blood pressure. Now, one of my favorite ways to use them is in my beetroot hummus, which is my favorite color. It's bright pink, and I also love using beetroot in my red velvet smoothie recipe. If you've ever tried a red velvet cupcake, this smoothie basically turns all those delicious flavors into a thick, creamy, nutritious smoothie. And both recipes, the beetroot hummus and the red velvet smoothie, will be linked in the show notes below this episode. So try them both and let me know which one you prefer. Now let's get into today's episode on nutrition and mental well-being as a working mum with Jenna Hope, who's a registered nutritionist, author of How to Stay Healthy, and founder of Jenna Hope Nutrition. Jenna has an undergraduate and masters in nutrition, and she works closely with individuals, brands, and the media to provide practical, non-restrictive nutrition advice. Jenna aims to simplify nutrition and support long-term health and well-being. So welcome, Jenna, to the Gut 360 podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Ellie. I'm so looking forward to talking to you today.
Such a pleasure to have you on. I'd love if we could start by you telling us a little bit about your journey to becoming a nutritionist, how you got to where you are, and also your journey to becoming a mum.
For sure. So I think my journey to becoming a nutritionist really started from, I would say, when I was born. I've always been a lover of food. I've always enjoyed food, and it's just always played a big part in my life growing up. And our family, it was always something that, we got together through food. And as I got to kind of early teenage years, that was around the time where I started to become a bit more aware of myself, my skin, my mental well-being, my energy levels. And it was also the time where you start going out with your friends and, I'd find McDonald's and I'd find all the, let's say, less health beneficial foods out there. And really my diet shifted. So growing up, my mum used to cook a lot from scratch, whole foods, lots of fruits and vegetables, everything was organic. And around this time, really, I started to branch out into much higher sugar foods and foods that are not so beneficial for your overall well-being. And a couple of years later, my mum said to me, we were talking about how I felt in general. My mum said, why don't you look at changing your diet, reduce your sugar intake? You're eating quite a lot of sugar. And I did. And I noticed almost instantly the effects that had on how I felt about myself, my mental well-being, my energy levels. And that was around when I was like 16, 17. So around the time that you're looking to go to university. And I just became fascinated by the way in which food can affect you. And for me, I'm really fortunate that despite growing up in the 90s, nutrition we didn't know of it as nutrition, we just knew it as healthy eating. For me, that wasn't about weight. It was always presented to me about your heart health, right? Everything was associated with your heart health because that's like what my mom knew. So I sort of, when I was 17, 18, I looked to go and study nutrition at university. And as I say, the rest of history is history. I did an undergraduate in nutrition and exercise and then a master's in nutrition. And after that, I went on to do some work experience and some placements. And then I set up my nutrition consultancy, Jenna Hope Nutrition. And I've been doing that for the past 8 years and I absolutely love it. And that's kind of how I got into nutrition. My motherhood journey started around a year ago. We didn't have a super smooth conception story. So I know some people will have it a lot harder, but it's something that I always think it's important to highlight. So for us, I was under the impression that we would start trying for a baby and we would get pregnant relatively quickly, I'd always focus on my nutrition. Health was really important to me. So I just didn't really think that wasn't a possibility. And to cut a long story short, it didn't go smoothly. We tried for 14, 15 months. And after trying for a while, I went to start to find out a bit more about potentially following an IVF journey. Now, we didn't actually have to go down that route because I ended up having something called a high COSI, which is essentially, which I didn't know about. And so I'm really passionate about making sure that other people know that this is a thing. But it's essentially where they flush through your fallopian tubes. And it turned out mine were blocked. And that was why I wasn't falling pregnant. And then I got pregnant. And then, my little girl came about a year ago and she's going to be 1 next week, which I just can't believe.
That's amazing. I can't believe she's already turning 1. And thank you so much for opening up and sharing that with us. It's really interesting. I think that's definitely something that not a lot of women know even exists. So it's amazing that was pointed out to you and you were able to discover what the issue was here and get to the bottom of it without having to go down the IVF route. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I also love that you said you have always taken the non-weight approach, but more focused on the health aspects. I think that's really important. Things like our heart health, our cholesterol, our gut health, our mental health, our hormones, all of these are linked to the food that we're putting in our body. And a lot of people think that they need to become obsessed with calories or macro counting, protein, cutting out carbs in order to look really skinny in a bikini or, whatever the physique that they're going for is. But it's obviously about so much more than that. It's really about our health. So what I'd like to know is, how has your approach to nutrition shifted since you've become a mum? Is there anything that's changed in the last year or so?
For sure. So I think just to add on to that is, I totally agree with you. There's definitely times where it's okay to want to lose weight. That's okay. And actually I work with a lot of clients who that is the situation, but really it's the reasons behind that that's really important. And particularly becoming a mum, obviously your body changes when you go through pregnancy, and there's a lot of pressure around trying to go back to your postpartum body once you've had a baby, this 6-week bounce back. And the truth is, it doesn't really exist, right? You've undergone so much, right? You've put your body through so much. Everything changes, from your brain health to your gut health to how you view yourself to your joint health, everything that you can't expect to just bounce back within 6 weeks. So in terms of my approach to nutrition, I suppose pre-motherhood, I would have the time to think, what do I fancy eating today? And I'd think about it, and then I'd decide, do you know what? I fancy a salad, or I fancy an omelette, or fancy a wrap, or whatever it is. And then I'd make it and spend a little bit of time making it, and I'd enjoy it. And nowadays, I'm much more focused on what's quick but nutritious, what's going to fuel me. And I still do enjoy food, but what I would say is that it's definitely taken a lot of the choice element out. So I have a couple of staples that I kind of turn to when it's quick and easy. So I think when you're juggling work as well, as soon as I put the baby down to nap, instead of thinking about actually what do I want to eat, I'm thinking about, right, what work do I need to get on with? So I'll quickly whip something up. For me, scrambled eggs are an absolute go-to at the moment. I do try to still prioritize some of those key principles of nutrition. So diversity, for example. So even if I'm making scrambled eggs, I'll chuck in some different vegetables, or I'll throw in some different herbs and spices. A yogurt bowl is my go-to in the morning. So again, I'll mix up the types of yogurt, or I'll use different toppings, different seeds, different fruits, different dried fruits, different types of nuts for the nut butter. And those things are super simple and super easy to do, and they don't take any more time than, if you didn't do them. So I would definitely say that one of the ways in which it's changed is I just don't have the time to think about what I want to eat. I think also, again, I don't have the time to spend cooking as much as I did before. So it's just about what's available. I use a lot of tinned and canned produce, a lot of frozen things, which is really useful. Before I might have spent a lot longer cutting up vegetables. So definitely in that way as well. And I'm also much more focused on actually what my daughter's eating. So a lot of my priority when I'm thinking about food and nutrition is, what am I going to give her for lunch? What's she going to have for dinner? What's her next breakfast? And less so about me. And the truth is, I hate to say it, but you do kind of fall to the bottom of the list. And I do still try really hard to prioritize some level of self-care. but it's just not, it can't be what it was before. It just can't.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it seems like you have a really good approach. I mean, I love that you're focusing on diversity. Obviously, I specialize in gut health, and one of the easiest ways to improve our gut health is just incorporating more diversity, a wider variety of different plant-based foods into our diet. So I love the yogurt bowl idea of chucking in different nuts and seeds, switching up your grains. Do you have any other kind of go-to staples apart from your yogurt bowls, your scrambled eggs with the different herbs and spices? What else are your quick lunches, dinners, breakfasts as well that you're going to all the time?
So tray bakes are amazing. I rely on them all the time. Sometimes I just open some pre-chopped vegetables. I appreciate that that's not always feasible for everyone, but onto the tray with some meat or fish, some beans, again, lots of herbs and spices, drizzle of olive oil, salt, and in the oven it goes. And then I've got, you know, between 25 minutes and 40 minutes to just crack on and do whatever else I need to do. So that's amazing. Soups, so not so much at this time of year, but in the winter, again, I'll just throw everything into a pot, leave it to cook, and then whiz it all up together. And I'm not amazing, as much as I try to encourage my clients at doing it. I'm not amazing at pre-cooking and then putting things in the freezer. I'd much rather cook for sort of 2-3 days in one go and then move on. Chia pudding is a really good go-to as well. Overnight oats, I use a lot. Frittatas. So again, if my oven's on, I try to just make the most out of the fact the oven's on. I'm just going to put everything in whilst I can. I don't have to think about lots of different timings and then getting all busy again. So I'll whip up a frittata. I'll whip up some baked oats. I'll roast up some potatoes or sweet potatoes, put them in the oven so that I know that, great, if the next day I need lunch, I can just open a sweet potato, jacket sweet potato, throw in some tuna, some sweet corn, top it off with some fresh herbs, and you're good to go. So really, it's just about making it easy. It's not always the most exciting and innovative at the moment, I have to admit, but I try where I can. And I think that's the most important thing.
Well, it all sounds really delicious to me. And I think it's, you know, clever how you have these little hacks, like when the oven's on, just chuck everything in. I always say, if you're chopping up vegetables anyway, do the whole bag and then you've got leftovers for a few days. Or I love the freezing leftovers and then just sticking it in the microwave or heating it up on the stove whenever I need a quick, healthy frozen dinner that's ready made. And I know that my future self will always thank me. But equally, just having leftovers in the fridge for a few days is so helpful when you've got a lot going on. So do you think that motherhood has challenged your mental well-being? And if you're happy to share, how would you say that you use nutrition to support this?
For sure. I think in the early days, to be honest, even now, I just want to do it all. I want to work. I breastfeed exclusively. I want to try and sleep. I want to look after the baby. I just want to try and do it all. So definitely in the early days, I put a lot of pressure on myself to try and do everything. And actually, when the baby's younger, it's easier to do that. So whilst I was feeding, I would be working. But nowadays, I can't do that. She's much more aware and I don't want to be on devices whilst I'm with her. So I can't do that so much. The pressure is really, really difficult. I also think that in the early days where your hormones are all over the place, you're much more likely to feel low. You're constantly questioning yourself. And I think this is just a natural part of becoming a mother. You're always going to be thinking, is that the right thing? Have I dressed her correctly? Is she hungry? Is she thirsty? You know, have I said this? And even now, as she gets a bit older and she's becoming more aware of our language, am I saying this correctly? Is what I'm saying going to be interpreted wrongly? You know, someone said to me yesterday that you shouldn't really, or not you shouldn't, but for them, they don't want to call their child good boy or good girl because they feel like that provides like a conditional love. So now I'm thinking, should I not tell her good girl? Should I tell her good girl? Do you know what I mean? It's like you're constantly questioning every single thing. And I think you just have to listen to you. And then on top of that, obviously, you're sleep deprived. So in the early days, it's very easy to want to rely on caffeine all the time. And I think luckily, if you're breastfeeding, you can't really do that so much. So, you know, I love my matcha and I'll definitely enjoy a matcha a day. But I think that's one of the things that can really negatively impact your well-being. If you're already feeling quite anxious and you're already feeling quite stressed, if you throw in a couple of coffees a day because you're feeling tired. And this goes for anyone, you know, who's not necessarily just mums, it goes for everyone. That can increase your anxiety tenfold and make you feel so much worse. So really trying to rely on caffeine-free alternatives, making sure that you're staying hydrated. That's the other thing, is often I just either forget to drink or don't have time to drink. If I don't have my 2-litre bottle of water with me, or when I'm at work, it's great because I actually can think about, my needs. But when I'm with my daughter, you don't have that time. You're constantly giving her water, constantly making sure she's okay. Now she's crawling, so I'm like chasing her all over the place, making sure she's not putting things in her mouth. You don't really have time to think about your needs. So where you can, I would say, have a massive bottle of water with you. That's really helpful. Making sure you're eating regularly as well, because that's another thing, particularly in the early days. I remember that the mornings would just disappear and I would be like, I've been up since 5 o'clock, but I have not had breakfast. And it's now 11:30. Like, what on earth is going on? And particularly when you're breastfeeding, and even if you're not, you need to be able to fuel your energy to be able to support your child. So making sure that I've got quick things. Also, I did mention before, but egg muffins are another quick and easy go-to that I use all the time, both for me and my daughter. And I think it's just about having little hacks that you can use. So protein obviously is really important when it comes to mental well-being. Eating regularly so your blood sugar levels are stable, super important. Trying to get your omega-3 in. So I knew that in the early days, I just wasn't going to have any time to cook. And I was really fortunate that I had family who were amazing and did cook for us, but I wasn't going to start requesting, can I have 2 portions of oily fish a week, please? So I was taking a postnatal omega-3 supplement. And even now I'm still taking my postnatal supplements to make sure that I'm getting my nutrients in, because it can be tough, and, not every day is going to be nutritionally complete.
Absolutely. I think it's so important to recognize that. And at the end of the day, we just need to do our best. We just need to do our best every day and know that on the days where we haven't hit all our ultimate nutrition targets, it's okay, and we go again tomorrow. There's actually so much that I want to pick up on what you've just said. So number one, hydration, that's super important. And then also with the caffeine, I know you love matcha, so do I. Obviously matcha still contains some caffeine that's released at a slower rate than coffee. But let's say someone is a new mum, they're maybe breastfeeding, or maybe they're trying to conceive or they're pregnant, so they're trying to reduce their caffeine intake. Do you have any caffeine alternatives or swaps that you would recommend?
Yeah, so weirdly, when I was pregnant, I actually started drinking decaf English breakfast tea, which I've never been an English breakfast tea drinker in my life. And even though it can still contain very, very small amounts of caffeine, it is considered safe. So that was a really good option. I think it still gives you that breath almost in the day.
That very English sigh of relief.
Exactly that. Herbal teas are really good. If you are pregnant, though, you do need to be slightly careful because some of them contain licorice root, and that's not great during pregnancy. So I would definitely say just be aware of what you're drinking. Turmeric lattes can be really good for a caffeine-free option. Love those, especially in the winter. And then, if you're someone who is a relatively new mum, you're not breastfeeding, or you're not necessarily aware of your caffeine intake, but you are aware of your mental well-being, kombucha is a really good alternative. So obviously it does still contain some caffeine, but from, I know so many mums who when they get towards the end of the day, they put the baby down and they're like, oh, I need a glass of wine. Actually, we know that can have a negative impact on your sleep and your mental well-being as well. So kombucha can be a really good option there. Obviously, as I say, it does contain caffeine. They're probably my go-tos, to be honest.
So many great ideas there. Kombucha, obviously, I love for the gut health benefit because we know it contains live bacteria or probiotics to support the gut microbiome as well. I love a turmeric latte as well, especially in the winter. So some great ideas there. I'd also love to know, while you're breastfeeding, are there any specific nutrients that you need more of? I know obviously your calorie intake goes up because you're burning a lot of energy by producing milk and feeding your baby, but any specific nutrients that people should be aware of postpartum, like post-birth recovery, and also specifically for breastfeeding?
Definitely. So just to touch on the calorie requirements. So just to link this back to what we were saying earlier about that pressure to lose the pregnancy and the baby weight. Actually, when you're breastfeeding, your appetite increases. I found that it was, exponential. And it's so important that you are eating those foods to be able to support the production of your milk. Things like calcium are really important. Iron is vital. So even if you're not breastfeeding, just from a postpartum perspective, particularly if you've lost a lot of blood during your birth, that's something to be aware of. Vitamin D is crucial. So making sure that you're taking your supplement in the winter months. I also think that as a new mum, you're going to be spending less time in the sun as well. So you're constantly pumping the baby in the sun. So naturally, you're going to be spending less time in the sun. So you might want to think about continuing your vitamin D supplement. As I say, omega-3 is also really important. And iodine is another nutrient which often isn't really spoken about, but there's a really strong link between iodine consumption in the mother and cognitive development of the fetus in breastfeeding or breastfed babies. So iodine, which is found in things like dairy products, prunes, seaweed, and white fish, that's really important too.
That's really interesting. I think iodine is one that really doesn't get talked about enough. Really important to be aware of that. And also, like you said, just kind of to keep taking a prenatal supplement throughout post-birth as well, throughout that period, can be really supportive to make sure that you're getting in those nutrients. Now, I'd love to pivot a little bit to talk about anxiety, because I know anxiety is something that can be quite common in new mums, also not just in new mums, but for anyone. I know a lot of people who struggle with anxiety. I think it's so common these days. So do you have any advice for managing this, both from a nutrition point of view and also lifestyle? Because, you know, on the Gut 360 podcast, I always love to take that 360-degree approach to wellness. So any practices you'd recommend or any advice here for anxiety?
Definitely. So I think, obviously, you know that anxiety is really heavily linked with supporting a healthy gut. So that one of the first things that we need to think about is making sure that we're getting lots of fiber in, making sure we're having a really diverse diet where we can, lots of herbs, lots of spices. I think also, particularly as a new mum, and I ended up having an emergency C-section, that can have a negative effect on your gut health too. So if you are a mum who's given birth by a C-section, you really want to try to focus on supporting a healthy gut, and that can help with your mental well-being. Also, for anyone who's not necessarily a mum, I would say prioritize your sleep where you can. If you are a mum, they say sleep when the baby sleeps. I mean, maybe it works for some people. For me, I could never do it. I think my brain was always too active with other things that I needed to get on with. But taking that time. So one of the things that I found really helpful was getting up in the morning, having a shower, getting ready before the baby wakes up, and then knowing that I can start my day fresh, clean, and ready to go. I find that often when I speak to my mum friends, or even the days that I didn't do that, and you find that actually the morning's gone away with you, and by 12 o'clock, you're still in your pajamas and you haven't had a shower, they're the days where you're more likely to feel more anxious, lower in your mood. So simple things like that can have a really big effect. Try to take a couple of moments in your day for deep breathing where you can. So if you're breastfeeding or even bottle feeding your baby, whilst you're doing that, just take a few deep breaths in, and it makes such a difference. You're just becoming a bit more mindful, a bit more aware of your surroundings. And I think it's easy to focus on the stress, the anxiety, and the low mood, but actually it's an amazing time as well. And you want to enjoy it because it really is so special. I walked a lot as well in the early days. So luckily I have a dog, so that makes me go out. But I also had a baby who didn't go to sleep. So I used to have to walk for hours a day to try and get her to sleep. And I found that was amazing for anxiety and, you know, mental well-being as well.
Walking is such a magical, life-changing practice. I think people really underestimate the power of a simple walk. I actually love that you were talking about deep breaths. And while you were, I was muted, but I was taking in this deep breath in and then this slow exhale while I was listening to you talk. And I literally felt my nervous system slow down, like getting out of that fight or flight that we live in constantly, this state of our sympathetic nervous system, and then getting into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what we call rest and digest. So a few simple deep breaths, a longer exhale can be such a quick, easy, free way to snap out of that fight or flight and just slow down. I think that's, really, really important for so many of us. With anxiety, obviously, we know that our mental health and our gut health are so closely connected through the gut-brain axis. I'd love if you could talk to us a little bit about that connection between the gut and the brain and how we can actually help to manage feelings of anxiety by supporting our gut health.
For sure. So the gut and the brain are connected via the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve, it's a two-way bi-directional communication pathway, right? So your brain can speak to your gut and your gut can speak to your brain. And I heard somewhere a really interesting analogy of this, or a really interesting explanation for how we even know that exists, right? When you are in a public environment and you might need to go to the bathroom, your brain tells your gut, actually, now is not an appropriate time to go. And then when you get home, all of a sudden you know that it's an appropriate environment and you're ready to go. So that's just a really nice explanation for how, just a simple way to show that actually they really are connected. And we know that different types of bacteria in the gut are associated with different mental health kind of conditions or benefits. So what's really important is that we are producing lots of the beneficial bacteria, and that the beneficial bacteria are producing things called short-chain fatty acids. And the short-chain fatty acids, so specifically things like propionate, butyrate, are associated with different health outcomes and benefits of lowering anxiety. And one of the ways in which we can do that is by eating fermented foods. So things like kimchi, kefir, sauerkraut, sourdough bread as well, making sure though that it's sourdough and not sourdough, unfortunately. Nowadays, because sourdough kind of took off, we saw a lot of supermarkets trying to fast forward the fermentation process. And actually, a lot of the sourdough breads on the market are not real. They don't contain the live cultures and the beneficial bacteria. So making sure that you're getting good quality sourdough is key. And I think also making sure that you're incorporating a wide range of different types of fiber to feed the different beneficial bacteria in the gut, that's really key. But also thinking about trying to reduce your intakes of artificial sweeteners. So we know that consuming lots of artificial sweeteners can give rise to the more pathogenic bacteria in the gut. So that's the bad bacteria that we don't want to take over. We also want to make sure that we're consuming plenty of omega-3. That's going to help to support the gut lining as well. So that's really key. So that's in the form of like oily fish, flax seeds, walnuts as well. That can help too.
Brilliant. So many practical tips that our listeners can take away. You're such a wealth of knowledge, honestly. I mean, I knew that, especially after reading your book, How to Stay Healthy. You are so full of knowledge and you've got so much to share and to offer. So I'd actually love to chat a little bit about your book. Firstly, you wrote this while you were pregnant, didn't you? And what was that like?
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's really kind of you to say. Yes, I did write it whilst I was pregnant. And I think the writing of it was actually fine. The bit I really struggled was with my book edits. So I gave birth on the Thursday. I went into labor on the Tuesday. On the Wednesday, I got an email saying that your book edits are due in 10 days. I gave birth on the Thursday, and obviously I hadn't seen that email because I was in labor. And then by the Sunday, I was like, right, let me look at my emails. I had about a week to deliver my book edits with a new baby. And it was honestly, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. It was, unfortunately, I would say it was probably one of the, not the worst weeks of my life, because obviously I just given birth and I just had a baby, but it was definitely one of the hardest weeks of my life. I was trying to do book edits whilst trying to feed and look after this newborn baby, whilst recovering from 48 hours in labor and an emergency C-section. So it was a really, really difficult period. And my body showed me that. My immune system just broke out. I broke out in hives. And which was ironic because I was writing a book on how to stay healthy. So that's essentially what it was like, but it was worth it.
It sounds incredibly stressful and exhausting, I'm not going to lie, but I think it's unbelievable that you managed to put it together. And obviously I've read it and it's so brilliantly written. So firstly, how did you find balance? I think after that initial week, because it sounds like there probably wasn't a lot of balance in that first week, but once you'd submitted the edits, how did you then find balance and take care of yourself physically, mentally? And then also, if you can tell our listeners, what types of things can they expect to learn from reading the book? Because obviously there's so much good stuff in there.
Thank you. So after that initial week, I then realized that I had to really prioritize my health, the baby's health, and just my family unit for a short period of time. And so I worked sort of here and there. And as I said earlier, it was actually easier to work because whilst I was feeding, I could work. As I said, also, I walked a lot. So that was really, really helpful for my own mental well-being. I'd listen to podcasts, and just being outside, I find incredibly empowering. And I find it really, really helpful for my mental health. It's something which I kind of have a non-negotiable every day as I get out for a walk. In terms of what people can expect to learn from the book. So the book is it's largely about the immune system, but actually it's about staying healthy in general. So a lot of the principles in the book are there to support a day-to-day, just how to live a healthy lifestyle. The first few chapters go through what the immune system is, and how the immune system is linked to your gut health, and then what you can do to help support your immune system through the foods that you're eating, the lifestyles that you're leading, how menopause affects it. I talk about how your childhood experiences and how growing up affects your immune system and your health outcomes. And so I think for me at the time of writing that, I was pregnant. So I was thinking more about that from a parent's point of view. And what's really important is none of us can change how we grew up, right? But we can use that information to understand maybe some of our health outcomes and to work with those health outcomes through our diets and our lifestyles in order to try to improve them now. But also for any parents or caregivers or prospective parents or caregivers thinking about how what you're doing on a day-to-day basis is going to impact the child that you're looking after.
So interesting. I think there is honestly so much that we can all learn from that and from all the different sections of your book as well. I love that it really dives into so many different areas of our health. And I love the perspective that you give it as well. Now, on the Gut 360 podcast, we have a closing tradition where I ask every guest, what does a 360-degree approach to health look like for you?
I love this question. So I think 2 years ago, I would have said it's about going to all the nice fancy gym classes and going to get a green juice afterwards, but also enjoying a glass of wine and a slice of cake when I want to. Whereas nowadays, it's if my baby's happy and safe and well fed and my family unit's happy, I've had time to get out for a walk and I've, ate some nutritious food and stay hydrated, I'm really happy. I'm really content. And, I think for me now, it's more about the simple things. There will definitely come a time, I hope, where I go back to all those, nice reformer Pilates classes when I have a bit more time. But for now, it's just the more simple things.
That's what it's all about, really, isn't it? I mean, I love that answer. I think that's a beautiful way to look at things. So often we lose perspective about what's really important in life. How many fancy London gym classes can we go to? And can we still enjoy our wine on a Saturday night? And all of that's fun, absolutely. But yeah, I love your way of looking at it. So thank you for sharing that. And also just a really big thank you for your time today coming onto the podcast. You have so much to share. You've been such a wonderful friend and mentor to me on my nutrition journey as well. I actually remember when I was first starting to think about studying nutrition, I was doing my degree in French and Spanish at the time. We went for a matcha and you gave me some advice about becoming a registered nutritionist, what kinds of qualifications to do. And it was just really inspiring to hear from you and to see how far you've come on your own journey. So thank you for being a part of my journey as well. And I'd also love to ask, where can people find you and how can people work with you?
Thank you so much. Well, I'm really honored that you've had me. And yes, I very much remember that matcha. And I have to say, likewise, it's incredible to see your hard work, your determination, and where you've got to as well. So kudos to you. You've done amazing.
Thank you so much.
And in terms of where people can find me, so I am on Instagram at Jenna Hope Nutrition. My website is jennahopenutrition.com. If you're interested in working with me, your best way to contact me is either via DM or through the contact page on my website.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jenna. And it's been so wonderful to have you on today. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Gut 360 podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast or learned something new, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. And make sure you hit follow for weekly episodes every Monday morning. Do share this podcast with anyone who you think it may benefit. And for your chance to win a free online nutrition consultation with me, just take a screenshot of this episode and share it on your Instagram stories, tagging at Eli Brecher Nutrition so I can repost you. See you back here next Monday.